name is Sandra Ellis. Throughout this year, I've been researching the Syrian conflict. The main controversies for this issue is whether or not Syria really is behind this issue, and also whether or not the United States should bomb Syria. At the beginning of this project, I thought that the United States must be absolutely certain that Syria was behind this before taking action. However, in order to come to this conclusion, we must first look into the relationships that Syria has with other countries. Please enjoy the next video of President Obama as he delves into some background on the Syrian conflict.
I have gotten options from our military. I had extensive discussions with my national security team. So let me talk about what's at stake here. I think we all understand terrible things have been happening in Syria for quite some time, that the Assad regime there has been killing its own people by the tens of thousands, that there are sectarian arguments that have spilled over into bloodshed and have escalated over the last couple of years. And although what's happened there is tragic, and although I have called for Assad to leave and make sure that we've got a transitional government that could be inclusive in Syria, what I've also concluded is that direct military engagement, involvement in a civil war in Syria would not help the situation on the ground. Nobody disputes, or hardly anybody disputes, that chemical weapons were used on a large scale in Syria against civilian populations. We have looked at all the evidence, and we do not believe the opposition possessed nuclear weapons of that, or chemical weapons of that sort. We do not believe that, given the delivery systems using rockets, that the opposition could have carried out these attacks. We have concluded that the Syrian government, in fact, carried these out. And if that's so, then there need to be international consequences. If, in fact, we make a choice to have repercussions for the use of chemical weapons, then the Assad regime, which is involved in a civil war, trying to protect itself, will have received a pretty strong signal that, in fact, it better not do it again. And that doesn't solve all the problems inside of Syria. And it doesn't obviously end the death of innocent civilians inside of Syria. And we hope that, in fact, ultimately a political transition can take place inside of Syria. And we're prepared to work with anybody, the Russians and others, to try to bring the parties together to resolve the conflict.
Now that you understand the basics of the happenings in Syria, let us dive into our first controversy. Should the United States bomb Syria or not? In this political cartoon, the artist expresses his opinion on the Syrian conflict. He compares the United States' situation with Syria with the Vietnam War years ago. He believes that if we go to war with Syria, then it will be under false pretenses, as the United States is not 100% certain that Assad is to blame for this devastation. He thinks that a war with Syria would lead to unnecessary bloodshed as well. Please enjoy the following video as President Obama gives his opinion on this matter.
Commit atrocities. They depend upon the world to look the other way until those horrifying pictures fade from memory. But these things happened. The facts cannot be denied. The question now is what the United States of America and the international community is prepared to do about it. Because what happened to those people, to those children, is not only a violation of international law, it's also a danger to our security. Let me explain why. If we fail to act, the Assad regime will see no reason to stop using chemical weapons. As the ban against these weapons erodes, other tyrants will have no reason to think twice about acquiring poison gas and using them. Over time, our troops would again face the prospect of chemical warfare on the battlefield. And it could be easier for terrorist organizations to obtain these weapons and to use them to attack civilians. If fighting spills beyond Syria's borders, these weapons could threaten allies like Turkey, Jordan, and Israel. And a failure to stand against the use of chemical weapons would weaken prohibitions against other weapons of mass destruction and embolden Assad's ally, Iran. which must decide whether to ignore international law by building a nuclear weapon or to take a more peaceful path. This is not a world we should accept. This is what's at stake. And that is why, after careful deliberation, I determined that it is in the national security interests of the United States to respond to the Assad regime's use of chemical weapons through a targeted military strike. The purpose of this strike would be to deter Assad from using chemical weapons, to degrade his regime's ability to use them, and to make clear to the world that we will not tolerate their use. That's my judgment as Commander-in-Chief. But I'm also the president of the world's oldest constitutional democracy. So even though I possess the authority to order military strikes, I believed it was right, in the absence of a direct or imminent threat to our security, to take this debate to Congress.
Now that we have heard both sides of the argument on whether or not the United States should bomb Syria or not, we will now analyze the relationship between Syria and Russia to determine whether or not Russia is to blame as well for the catastrophe that occurred in Syria due to the use of chemical weapons. In the cartoon shown, the cartoonist clearly depicts his opinion in the cartoon. He believes that Russia is supplying fatal weapons to a war-crazed Assad for little to no cost. In addition, the cartoonist infers that Russia is to be held responsible for this disaster as they were supplying weapons to Assad. This second political cartoon also depicts this close relationship between Syria and Russia. The artist calls them blood brothers, and this has a double meaning to it. It is referring to Syria's relationship with Russia, but it is also referring to the blood that both Syria and Russia have on their hands from the disaster that occurred in Syria. The artist also seems to put some of the blame on Russia, since Russia may be supplying Syria with these chemical weapons. Since we have now examined Syria's relationship with Russia, next we will analyze the effects that the Syrian conflict is having on the Syrian people and the countries surrounding Syria as well. According to NPR, Syria is on track to becoming the world's largest source of refugees. United Nations High Commissioner Antonio Guterres speculates that if the current rate of refugees continues, then there might be 4 million Syrian refugees by the end of this year. Ironically, Syria was once one of the major destinations for refugees, but now it is among the main sources for refugees. The picture that is displayed captures the crowds of refugees who are waiting in line for food in Damascus, Syria. The cartoon display shows the effect that this conflict is having on the Syrian people. It depicts the overflow of refugees that are fleeing Syria due to its new policies. It also shows that many of the refugees are escaping to Turkey and Jordan. This infers the negative effect that this crisis has on these countries. The following video, courtesy of CNN, goes into depth about how this conflict is affecting the Syrian refugees, particularly the children.
We kind of approached the camps with an open mind, not really knowing what we were going to find, but as we started talking to some of the kids and some of the refugees, each story was so strong and compelling and just incredible. I think we were all very, very moved by these kids and their honesty and their courage.
You know, the thing that stood out for me as I watched their stories is how they seem so incredibly poised and resilient, even though they are, of course, so sad. Talk to me about that and what struck you as you talked to these children, each of them with a terrible story.
I think what I remember from those days more than anything else is how open and sincere and honest and compelling they were. They were very natural. When we asked them questions, they just answered each and every question with incredible answers. It was not difficult to do these stories because the people that we were interviewing, they were just amazing stories. The little boy Hamze, who, you know, he didn't really talk. I mean, we interviewed him and tried to talk to him a little bit, and he was very, very honest. When we said, what do you like to draw? He said, tear gas. And we just kind of like had to think, why would he have this answer? And some of the camps have had riots, and some of the camps have had demonstrations. And so I had to remember that what has impacted him was those moments when there were problems in the camps, and he said tear gas. It was a very natural response.
You were there filming in these camps, talking to these kids. Describe for our viewers the conditions that these children are living in. I mean, just bring that home for us.
Well, I can tell you that I've been to many refugee camps all over the world, and these camps, to me, I was shocked when I first went there a few months ago, especially the ones on the border on the Syrian side. The camps in Bab el Salama and the others, they were really something that I had not seen in a long time in this part of the world. I've covered other conflicts in Kosovo, and I had not seen anything like this. They really, really had nothing. The first time we went into Atma, for example, the kids were basically sleeping on the ground. They had a blanket, but the nights, I know from being there for days, the nights were very, very cold, and I was there when they woke up, and you know, they were surprised to see someone there, like with a camera, and I was really, really, I guess it was sad. It was sad. I remember a moment, there was a little boy who kind of was following me, and he was standing next to me, and I put my hand out to hold his hand, and I was shocked at how cold his hand was. So one of the things that they really, really need is simple things like blankets, sweaters, jackets, shoes, very basic needs.
And what kind of help are they getting? I mean, what's your assessment of the aid that is reaching these kids and their families?
Each camp is different. The ones that we were in, they were getting very, very basic help. They are getting a little bit of help from several of the Turkish agencies. They're trying to, but because of the place where it is and how difficult it is to get to some of these camps, it's not easy for anyone to help them. The needs are, as I said, very basic: food, water, clean water. When we went there the first time, the water they were having to drink was not clean at all, and it was making everybody very ill. I know the conditions in some of those camps are improving slowly, but still the needs are immense.
You know, as I said, when I watched them, I was struck by how grown up these kids were in some ways. But then you sent us some pictures and they're all huddled around the camera, and then you just see that they really are just children. Talk to us about some of these images that we're looking at here.
Well, when we were working in the camp and we were trying to kind of just work in the camp, you know, they often follow you and they're very curious, and some of them talk to you. I don't speak Arabic, but there is a way that you can communicate with people with, you know, body language, trying to understand what they're trying to say to you. And I think it was a distraction for them. And they were, some of them were having fun. They were, you know, we were playing around. But then, you know, you come across something that catches your eye. And for example, the little boy Hamza, who, you know, we were just standing there, and all of a sudden I saw him and I just started running after. And once you start asking questions, you realize what a sad story behind why they are there, what's happened to them, and what they've witnessed. These are very, very strong stories from every single refugee that we met.
I hope that this presentation has helped you develop an opinion on this matter. However, bias is possible, as I'm an American, and that may influence mine or your view regarding this topic. It is so significant to learn about the Syrian conflict because it is happening right now, and the decision that is made will affect all of American and Syria's citizens, as this situation is on an international scope. After this project, I've concluded that even though it may end in conflict, the United States must get involved. The use of chemical weapons is not to be tolerated. In addition, this catastrophe has caused one of the countries that was one of the major destinations for refugees to become one of the major sources for refugees. It is one of the responsibilities of our government to provide foreign aid to those who are suffering. I hope that you have enjoyed this documentary. Thank you so much for listening.